Okay, I want you to imagine something for a moment. Picture yourself as a trader,
Right.
but not, a guy in a fleece vest staring at a computer screen.
No, no.
I mean a real merchant on a dusty road in India, and the year is somewhere around 600 BC.
Okay, I'm with you.
You're walking toward this massive settlement out in the Gangetic Plains. You've got a bullock cart creaking behind you, loaded with, I don't know, maybe fine cotton from Vatsa or something.
Jars of sesame oil, maybe.
Exactly. And you see these walls rising up in the distance.
And we're not talking about, like, simple mud fences here. These are fortified, imposing structures.
Right. So you get to the main gate, it's hot, you're ready to sell your goods. But here's the thing, and this is the detail that just completely stopped me when we were going through the research for this deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just walk in. You can't just nod to the guard and stroll through the market.
No, absolutely not. You'd be stopped right in your tracks.
You're stopped. And to get past those high walls, you need something that feels incredibly modern. You need an authorized entry token.
The clay seal.
A clay seal, basically a passport.
And a really striking detail, isn't it? And we have the archaeological evidence for these little clay seals that served as permits.
It's just wild.
And I think the reason it hits us so hard is because it just shatters that romantic idea we have of the ancient world, this open, borderless place where tribes just wandered freely.
Totally. I always pictured people just, roaming around, setting up camp wherever they felt like it. But this seal, this little piece of clay, it implies a whole system.
It implies bureaucracy and control.
Yes. It implies that someone, somewhere, is keeping a list, that they care who comes in and who goes out.
That clay seal is the smoking gun. It's the proof that something fundamental had shifted in how human society was organized on the subcontinent.
We're past the wandering tribes stage.
Way past it.
Yeah.
We've entered the era of the state.
Yeah.
With a capital S, rigid, territorial, guarded states.
And that is exactly what we're unpacking today. We are looking at one of the most dynamic, chaotic, and just game-changing periods in all of Indian history. The transition from what's called the later Vedic period to the era of the Mahajanapadas.
The Great Realms.
The Great Realms. It's fantastic. We're going to explore how 16 of these rival states basically fought it out in a massive real-life Game of Thrones.
It really was.
And we'll see how one of them, Magadha, rose up to dominate all the others using not just armies, but also economics, elephants, and some frankly terrifying military tech.
And we can't forget the party crashers.
Oh, right. The guys who show up uninvited from the West, the Persians, and then Alexander the Great, they just crash the whole scene.
It's a huge story.
It is. So let's start with the basics. You mentioned this shift, symbolized by the passports, was a move from the tribe to the state. The research talks about a linguistic shift, too, from the word jana to janapada. Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, it's a fascinating bit of etymology because the language perfectly mirrors what was happening in society. In the earlier Vedic period, your whole identity was tied to your jana.
Okay, so what does jana mean?
It literally means people or tribe or lineage. So if you were part of the Kuru jana, your loyalty wasn't to a piece of land, it was to the Kuru bloodline.
So it didn't matter if you were standing here or 50 miles to the east?
Not really, no. The state, so to speak, was the people themselves. It was mobile. The king was a Raja, but his title was often Janasya Gopa, which means guardian of the people.
Not lord of the land.
Exactly, not lord of the land. If the entire tribe picked up and moved, the state moved with them.
Okay, so it's a people-centric idea, but by 600 BC, that's changing.
It changes drastically. The term Janapada starts to become dominant. Now, pada literally means foot or foothold.
So where the tribe sets its foot.
Precisely. It implies settlement, it implies territory. The identity is now tied to the land itself.
That feels like such a profound psychological shift. It's no longer just, I'm loyal to my clan chief. It's, I'm loyal to this specific piece of earth between these two rivers.
And that's the revolution.
Yeah.
Because once you have land, you have borders. And if you have borders, you need to defend them.
Right. You can't just have part-time warriors anymore.
No. You need a professional standing army.
And standing armies, they don't grow their own food.
They don't. They need to be paid and fed, which means you need taxes. And to collect taxes, you need a bureaucracy. It's this domino effect of complexity, all stemming from that shift to territory.
And this whole process is what historians call the second urbanization. Why second? What was the first?
The first urbanization was the Harappan civilization, the Indus Valley civilization. Huge planned cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa.
The famous ones, yeah.
But that civilization declined around 1900 BC, and after it collapsed, well, for over 1,000 years, society in North India was mostly rural. It was village-based, pastoral. There were no big cities to speak of.
So it just de-urbanized.
It completely de-urbanized. But then, around the 6th century BC, in the Gangetic Plains, cities just explode back onto the scene.
So what was the trigger? If they went more than a millennium without cities, what was the catalyst that brought them back so suddenly?
I can give it to you in one word.
Go
Iron.
It all comes back to new technology, doesn't it?
It almost always does. You have to think about the geography. The Gangetic Plains are incredibly fertile, some of the best land on the planet. But back then, they were covered in thick, dense hardwood forests.
Okay.
And you just couldn't clear that with the tools they had. Copper and bronze tools. They're too soft. You hit a hardwood tree with a bronze axe, the axe is more likely to bend than the tree.
So for 1,000 years, the forest basically beat the farmers?
In a way, yes. People stuck to the riverbanks, to areas with lighter soil. But once iron technology becomes widespread, and we know the region was near major iron sources, everything changes. An iron axe can fell a hardwood forest.
Okay, so you can clear the land.
And then you can farm it. And that's the second part of the puzzle. Iron plowshares.
A stronger plow.
Much stronger. An iron plow can dig deep into that heavy, wet alluvial soil and really turn it over. And that leads to a massive, massive jump in agricultural production. Suddenly, you don't just have enough food, you have a surplus.
And surplus is the magic ingredient for civilization.
It's everything. If you're a farmer and you only produce enough rice to feed your own family, you can't have a city. You're a subsistence farmer.
Right.
But if you produce enough to feed your family plus 10 other families, well, now you can support artisans, traders, soldiers, priests, and kings who don't have to farm.
And you can build towns to house them all.
Exactly. And those towns become the administrative hubs for the Janapadas. And as these Janapadas grew, fought, and absorbed each other, the biggest and most powerful ones became Mahajanapadas.
The great countries.
The 16 heavyweights.
So we have these 16 contenders entering the ring. But what's really fascinating from the notes is that they weren't all the same. We tend to think of ancient history as just, kings and emperors. But there's a major political split here.
Very significant one. It was a period of real political experimentation. On one side, you had the monarchies.
That's the one we'd expect.
It's the standard model, yeah. A centralized rule, a hereditary king. Primogeniture is the rule, so the eldest son inherits the throne. Simple.
The king is the state. He owns everything.
Right. The king has sole rights to all revenue. And in these monarchies, you see a very strong alliance with the Brahmin priestly class.
How did that work?
It was a symbiotic relationship. The priests would perform these elaborate rituals to give the king divine legitimacy. The gods themselves have chosen him to rule.
And in return?
In return, the king protects the social order, the Varna system, which of course puts the Brahmins right at the top.
A classic I'll scratch your back situation.
Precisely. But then you have the other model, the Ganasangas.
The notes translate this as republics. And I have to ask, are we talking about ancient democracy? Were people lining up to vote?
We have to be really careful with words like republic or democracy. It wasn't one person, one vote. For the whole population, not at all.
So what was it?
It was more of an oligarchy, really. There was no single all-powerful king. Instead, major decisions were made collectively by the heads of the most powerful clans.
So instead of one king in a palace, you have a room full of, say, 500 clan chiefs arguing about policy.
That's a great way to put it. Each of these clan chiefs was called a Raja. They'd meet in a general assembly hall. Leadership was selected by this group, not automatically passed from father to son.
That's a huge difference.
It is. And another key difference, the influence of the priestly Brahmanical class was much, much lower in these republics. They were more independent-minded, less tied to the old rituals.
And their armies were different too, right? No central command.
Very different. In a monarchy, the king maintains a professional standing army paid for by state taxes. In the republics, each individual tribal Raja maintained his own little army.
Like a militia.
Exactly. And when there was a major threat, they'd all come together under a commonly appointed general, a Senapati, to fight as a confederacy.
So you have these two completely different systems, monarchies and republics, existing side by side, competing for dominance.
It's a fantastic historical moment, a real laboratory of political ideas.
Okay, well, we know who wins in the end, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. I want to get a sense of the map. The Buddhist text, the Anguttara Nikaya, lists these 16 Mahajanapadas.
The big 16.
The big 16. And looking at the map from the source material, they're spread out in this huge belt across north and central India. Let's do a quick tour so we know who the players are. Starting in the far northwest, modern Pakistan, Kashmir. Who's up there?
Up there, you've got two key players on the frontier, Cambodia and Gandhara.
Cambodia. What were they known for?
Horses. Above all else, horses. They had excellent horses and were known as remarkable horsemen. They were right on the edge of the subcontinent, close to the breeding grounds in Central Asia. So if you were king in the plains and you needed to build a cavalry,
You sent a buyer to Cambodia.
that's where you went.
Okay. And Gandhara, I've heard of them.
Gandhara is incredibly important. Its capital was Takshashila, or Taxila as the Greeks called it.
A university town, right?
A major center for trade, but also for learning, a real crossroads of cultures. But politically, Gandhara is interesting because it's one of the first to get picked off by an outside power.
The Persians.
Yep. The Achaemenid Emperor Darius conquered it in the 6th century BC, right when this whole period is kicking off.
So Gandhara is the gateway to India, and the Persians hold the key for a while. Okay, let's move south and east into the heartland along the Ganga and Yamuna rivers. This seems to be where things get crowded.
This is the heavyweight division. You've got Kuru and Panchala,
The famous kingdoms from the Mahabharata epic.
the very same. But by this point, 600 BC, the Mahabharata War is ancient history to them. They're established states. Panchala was actually split by the Ganga River into a north and a south Panchala.
Okay, and who else is in this central cluster?
You've got Vatsa on the Yamuna River. Its capital was Kaushambi. Vatsa was an economic powerhouse. They were famous for their fine cotton textiles. If you were rich in ancient India, you wanted Vatsa cotton.
A luxury brand.
Absolutely. And then there's Surasena, with its capital at Mathura, a very important religious center, even back then. King Avandapura, who ruled there, was actually an early disciple of the Buddha.
You see that a lot, these kings interacting with these new religious figures. And off to the west in Rajasthan?
That's where you find Matsya, the fish kingdom, around the modern Jaipur area.
Okay, now let's head east, because this is where the real contenders for the title start to emerge.
This is where the center of gravity is shifting. First up, Kosala, a major power. Its capital was Shravasti, and its king, Prasenjit, was a contemporary of the Buddha. In fact, Lumbini, where the Buddha was born, was within Kosala's sphere of influence.
And right next door you have Kashi.
Kashi, which is Varanasi. Even 2,600 years ago, it was a massive spiritual and economic hub. It was hugely wealthy, but, and this becomes a theme, it was eventually absorbed by its bigger neighbor, Kosala.
So Kashi was the prize everyone wanted.
The ultimate prize.
And then we have one of the republics we mentioned, Vaji.
The Great Confederacy of Vaji. Its capital was Vaishali. This was the headquarters of the Republican or Ghana Sangha system.
The big one.
Yeah. It was made up of several clans, but the most famous were the Lichavis and the Natrikas. And the Natrikas are important because Mahavira, the great teacher of Jainism, belonged to that clan.
So you have the Buddha associated with Kosala and Mahavira with Vaji. These new ideas are popping up right in the middle of this political cauldron.
It's no coincidence. A time of great change often produces new ways of thinking.
And the Mallas, they were a republic too.
Yes, another republic, though smaller. The Mallas are significant, mainly because that is where the Buddha passed away, where he attained Mahaparinirvana.
Okay, so just to complete the map, there's one really strange one way down south.
The outlier, that's Asaka. It's the only one of the 16 located south of the Vindhya Mountains, down on the Godavari River.
What's that tell us?
It shows that this political culture, the system of Janapadas, was starting to push south into the Deccan Plateau, into what's called the
The
Dakshinapatha.
Southern Road. Okay. And finally, before we get to the main event, there's the big rival, the other major contender, Avanti.
Avanti is absolutely crucial to this story. It was located deep in central India, in the Malwa region, with its capital at Ujjain.
That's pretty far from the Ganga Valley action.
It is, and that was part of its strength. It was rich in its own right, and it was kind of protected by the Vindhya Mountains. Its king, Pradyota, was famously fierce. For a very long time, it looked like the final showdown would be between Avanti and Magadha. They were the two superpowers.
But Avanti didn't win. Magadha did. So let's finally turn to our protagonist, Magadha, in modern-day Bihar.
Looking at the map, they don't seem that special at first glance. So why them? Was it just luck? Did they just have a series of brilliant kings?
It wasn't just luck. I mean, leadership played a part, but if you want to understand Magadha's success, you have to start with the land itself. It was a case of geography as destiny.
What do you mean?
Magadha basically hit the geographic jackpot. They had a series of incredible natural advantages that no one else had in quite the same combination.
Okay, lay them out for me. What's advantage number one?
Iron. The region of Magadha, especially as you go south towards modern Singham, had incredibly rich and accessible iron ore mines.
Oh.
So while other kingdoms had to trade for iron to make their weapons and their tools, Magadha was sitting right on top of the source. It gave them a constant supply of better, cheaper metal.
So they have sharper swords and stronger plows from day one. That's a huge head start.
Yeah.
Okay, what's next? Their capitals. Their first capital was a place called Rajgir, or Rajagriha, and it was a natural fortress.
How so?
It was completely surrounded by 5 hills. In an age of siege warfare before cannons, that's practically impregnable. You could just sit inside those hills and wait out any army that came to attack you.
Wow, okay, so a fortress built by nature.
And then, when they eventually moved their capital to Pataliputra, which is modern-day Patna, it was even better strategically. Pataliputra was what texts call a Jaladurga.
A water fort.
Exactly. It was built right at the confluence of the Ganga and the Sun rivers. So it had this massive natural moat on multiple sides.
But the rivers weren't just for defense, right?
No, that's the genius of it. The rivers were also highways. They gave Magadha unparalleled logistical capabilities. They could move armies, food, and trade goods up and down the river system faster and cheaper than any of their rivals who were stuck using ox carts on muddy roads.
Logistics wins wars.
It really, really does.
Okay, so we've got iron and strategic capitals. What else?
The forests in the region provided 2 more critical resources. First, timber. Lots of it. For building boats, for that river transport, and for building fortifications.
And the second thing,
Elephants.
the tanks of the ancient world.
That's the perfect analogy. Magadha was the first state in the region to systematically capture, train, and deploy elephants in warfare on a large scale.
I can't even imagine. You're a foot soldier from some smaller kingdom, and you see a line of these things charging at you for the first time.
It would be pure terror. It was a psychological and a physical superweapon.
So they have the best resources, the best defense, and the heaviest artillery. But the notes mention something else, a strategic idea that I just love. It calls it market-led territorial growth. What does that mean? It sounds like something from a business school textbook.
It does, but it's a really sharp analysis.
Ugh.
Magadha's rulers understood something profound. If you control the trade, you control everything. The Ganga was the economic artery of North India. So they didn't just conquer randomly. They systematically went after and captured key trade corridors and river routes. They didn't just absorb rivals by killing their kings. They did it by integrating their markets and strangling them economically.
It's like a hostile takeover. You buy up all the supply chains until the other company has no choice but to sell.
That's a very modern way to put it, but it's incredibly accurate. It was economic warfare just as much as it was military warfare.
So let's talk about the CEOs of this ancient corporation, the dynasties. It all kicks off with the Haryanka dynasty, and the first big name is Bimbisara.
Bimbisara, who comes to the throne around 544 BC, he's the one who really lays the foundation for all this success. And his primary tool wasn't the sword, it was what you might call matrimonial diplomacy.
He married his way to power.
Aggressively so. He had 3 main wives, and each one was a brilliant strategic move. His first wife was from Kosala, the big rival to the north.
Okay, neutralize a threat.
Better than that. That marriage came with the entire region of Kashi-Varanasi as her dowry.
Wait. He got Varanasi, the wealthiest city on the Ganga, as a wedding gift.
He did, an incredible political and economic coup.
Unbelievable. Who are the other wives?
His second wife was a princess from the Lichavi clan in Vaishali, which secured his northern border with that powerful republic. And his third was from a clan in the Punjab. He was literally marrying a buffer zone around his entire kingdom.
That is seriously smart. But he wasn't afraid of a fight when he needed one.
Oh no. He went to war with and conquered the kingdom of Anga to the east.
Why was Anga so important?
Because Anga's capital, Champa, was a major river port. It controlled access to the sea. By taking Anga, Bimbisara gave Magadha direct access to the maritime trade routes that went to Southeast Asia, what they called Suvarnabhumi, the land of gold.
There's that economic strategy again, control the routes. But he also had a softer side. I read this amazing story about him and his main rival in Avanti.
It's a great little anecdote. King Pradyota of Avanti, this fierce warrior, fell ill with jaundice.
Right.
And Bimbisara sent his own personal royal physician, a man named Javaka, all the way to Ujjain to treat and cure him.
Sending your best doctor to heal your arch-rival. That is some 4D chess right there. Keep your enemies close and healthy.
Or maybe just ensure stability on that front until you're strong enough to deal with them permanently. Who knows? But Bimbisara's own end was far less diplomatic. It was tragic.
He was killed by his own son, Ajatashatru.
Ajatashatru, a very different kind of ruler. The age of diplomacy was over. He imprisoned and then starved his father to death.
Wow.
He was an aggressor, he wanted total domination, and he wanted it now.
And he immediately goes to war with his family, right? The in-laws.
Immediately. When Bimbisara died, the king of Kosala, Ajatashatru's own grandfather, was horrified and took back Kashi, the dowry. Ajatashatru was not about to let that stand. He went to war with Kosala and also with the Vajji Confederacy, his mother's people.
And this is where we see that military tech you mentioned earlier. The sources describe 2 specific war engines that he used to crush the Vajji Republic.
These are incredible, and they show a real focus on military innovation. The first was the Mahashila Kantaka.
Mahashila Kantaka, what does that mean?
Maha is great, Shila is stone, and Kantaka can mean thorn or engine. So a great stone-throwing engine.
A catapult.
A massive catapult, yeah, used for hurling huge rocks to smash down the walls and gates of cities like Vaishali.
Devastating, I'm sure. And the second one, the name is even more brutal.
The Ratha Musala.
That just sounds like a weapon from a fantasy movie.
It might as well have been. It was a chariot, but it was fitted with either a giant swinging mace or, in some descriptions, scythe-like blades attached to the wheels. Yeah. You'd drive this thing at high speed through a pack formation of enemy infantry, and it was just...
The lawnmower for people.
It's a horrific image, but it was brutally effective. With these weapons, Ajatashatru crushed the Lichavis and annexed their territory after a long, drawn-out war.
It's so strange, though, this brutal conqueror. He also met the Buddha, didn't he?
He did. And after the Buddha's death, Ajatashatru was the patron of the first Buddhist council.
It's such a bizarre contrast. Inventing murder chariots on a Tuesday, sponsoring a religious conference on a Wednesday.
That's the complex reality of ancient kingship. Power was built on both blood and piety.
So after Ajatashatru and his son Udayan, who founded Pataliputra, the Haryankas fade out. Then we get the Shishunaga dynasty.
Right. Founded by a former minister named Shishunaga. His main claim to fame is that he was the one who finally definitively destroyed the Pradyota dynasty of Avanti.
The 100-year rivalry was over.
It was over. Magadha was the undisputed champion of the 16.
But the real shift, the transformation from just being the biggest kingdom to being a true empire, that comes with the next dynasty. The Nandas.
The Nandas. They are one of the most fascinating and controversial dynasties in early Indian history.
The sources call the founder, Mahapadmananda, the first empire builder of India. But they also seem to look down on him. They call him of low origin.
Yeah, the traditional Brahmanical texts are very dismissive of him. They claim he wasn't a Kshatriya, not from the warrior caste. Some sources even claim he was the son of a barber and a courtesan.
But in terms of what he actually did...
In terms of achievement, he was an absolute juggernaut. He took the kingdom he inherited and expanded it into a true pan-Indian empire. He even had a title, Sarvakshatrantaka.
Which means?
The uprooter of all Kshatriyas.
That is a terrifying title to give yourself.
It is, and it implies a deliberate policy. He seems to have systematically destroyed all the old, independent Kshatriya-ruling families of the former Mahajanapadas and replaced their power with his own centralized bureaucratic state.
He didn't just conquer them, he erased them.
That's the idea. And he built a massive centrally controlled army and amassed legendary wealth. The Nandas were famous for their treasury.
And this brings us back to that economic point. The analysis in our research suggests the Nandas created a state-run mining empire.
This is what likely set them apart. They didn't just tax the land and trade. They seem to have taken direct, monopolistic control over the mineral resources of their empire.
Like the iron mines we talked about.
The iron mines, copper, maybe even precious metals. By turning natural resource extraction into a state-run enterprise, they created a revenue engine of unprecedented scale. It gave them a level of fiscal dominance no one had ever seen before.
But all that central control and taxation probably didn't make them very popular. The last Nanda king, Nanda.
Nanda was incredibly powerful. He inherited this massive empire and army. This is the army that Alexander the Great's soldiers would later hear about and refuse to face. But by all accounts, he was widely hated.
Why?
Probably for his greed. He was seen as avaricious, constantly levying taxes to fill his treasury. He even invented a new, standardized measuring system, the Nanda, which was likely a way to ensure he got his cut of every single transaction in the empire.
So we'll come back to how he scared off Alexander, but first let's take a look inside this massive Magadha Empire that the Nandas are now running. What was life actually like for an ordinary person living in Pataliputra?
It was a life of very strict order and hierarchy. The administration was highly centralized, the king was at the top, and below him were these powerful officials called Mahamatras.
Ministers, basically.
Ministers, judges, army commanders, tax collectors, a whole professional bureaucracy. And the law they enforced was rigid.
Based on the Dharma Shastras, the religious texts.
Yes, and here's the crucial and frankly harsh reality of that system. There was no concept of equality before the law. Your punishment depended entirely on your caste, your varna.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. If a man from the Shudra Varna, the laborer caste, committed a crime against a Brahmin, the punishment would be incredibly severe. Flogging, mutilation, even death.
And if it was the other way around, a Brahmin commits the same crime against a Shudra?
The punishment would be far, far more lenient. Maybe a small fine. The system was explicitly designed to uphold the social hierarchy.
And the sources mention that during this period, a new social category starts to emerge, something even below the Shudras.
Yes. This is one of the darkest aspects of this era. We see the clear emergence of the concept of untouchability. A whole group of people who were considered so impure they were placed outside the four-varna system altogether.
And they were forced to live on the fringes of the villages and towns.
Literally on the outskirts. They were relegated to the most polluting jobs, like handling dead bodies or tanning leather. It was a systematic social and physical exclusion that, tragically, really solidifies during this period of great imperial prosperity.
What about the status of women?
Generally, it seems to have declined compared to the earlier Vedic period. It became an intensely patriarchal society. The primary duty of a high-caste woman was to produce sons to continue the lineage and perform rituals for the ancestors.
And the caste system itself became more rigid, more about birth.
Yes. The system of endogamy marrying only within your own caste group became much stricter. This was all about controlling women's lives to ensure the purity of the bloodline.
So socially, it's becoming more rigid and stratified. But what about the economy? It sounds like it was booming.
It was absolutely a boom time. One of the biggest indicators is the widespread use of coins for the first time.
Punch-marked coins. What did they look like?
They weren't like modern coins, perfectly round with a king's face on them. They were irregularly shaped pieces of silver or copper, and they were stamped or punched with various symbols.
Like what?
Hills, trees, bulls, fish, things like that. Each symbol might have represented a dynasty or a region. But the point is, you have a monetized economy. The great grammarian Panini, who lived around this time, even mentions the word for wages. Vetin. People were earning salaries.
And wherever you have money changing hands, you have someone trying to tax it.
Oh, absolutely. The peasant bore the heaviest burden. The main land tax was called bali, and it was typically 1/6 of the total produce.
1/6? That's steep.
It is. But that wasn't all. The sources also mention a system of forced labor.
Forced labor. Like slavery.
Not quite slavery, but a form of labor tax. An artisan, for example, might be required to work for the king for free 1 day out of every month. Peasants might be conscripted to work on roads or fortifications.
And what about trade? How was that taxed?
At the gates of every city, you'd have toll officials, cholkika, who would inspect goods and levy a tax. Remember that clay passport we started with? Part of its function was almost certainly related to customs and trade control.
It all sounds incredibly organized. The notes even mention guilds and specialized streets in the cities.
Yes, craftsmanship became highly specialized and often hereditary. You had guilds of weavers, potters, carpenters, metalworkers, and in the towns they would often live and work in specific streets. The merchant street was called a vesa. So if you needed a new pair of shoes, you literally went to the shoemaker's street.
It's a real city life. Okay, so we've got this massive, powerful, wealthy, and highly organized empire dominating eastern and central India. But meanwhile, over in the northwest, on the frontier, the door is getting kicked in.
Yeah, the northwest, what is now Pakistan and Afghanistan, has always been the corridor into India. And while Magadha was consolidating its power from the east, two major forces came crashing through that corridor from the west.
First up, the Iranians. The Persians.
The Achaemenid Empire. Under their great kings, Cyrus and then Darius, the Persians pushed east and conquered Gandhara and the Indus Valley region, and they held it for nearly 200 years.
And this wasn't just a brief military occupation. They left a real lasting mark on the culture, didn't they?
A huge mark. Take writing, for example. A script called Kharosthi was used in the Northwest for centuries. It's derived directly from Aramaic, which was the official language of the Persian Empire. It's even written from right to left, just like Aramaic.
What about art and architecture?
A massive influence. When we get to the Mauryan Empire later, and you see those famous, highly polished stone pillars of Ashoka.
With the lions on top.
With the lions, yes. The bill-shaped capitals on those pillars, the style of the animal sculptures, even the idea of inscribing royal edicts on rock faces, all of that shows very strong Persian influence.
They basically introduced the idea of imperial art to India.
In many ways, yes. They also introduced their administrative system of satraps, or provincial governors, and their coins, the silver sigloi.
Okay, so the Persians were in the northwest for a couple of centuries, but then in the 4th century BC, their empire gets conquered by someone new.
Someone very famous.
Alexander the Great.
The Macedonians arrive. In 326 BC, Alexander crosses the Hindu Kush and enters India.
Why did he even come? I mean, he just conquered the massive Persian Empire. Was he just trying to get to the end of the map?
That was part of it, the desire to reach the ends of the world. But he also knew about India's legendary wells from Greek writers like Herodotus. And crucially, he knew the Northwest was politically fractured.
Not a unified empire like Magadha.
Exactly. You had local kings like the ruler of Taxila feuding with his neighbor, King Porus. Alexander saw that disunity and knew he could exploit it.
Which leads to one of the most famous battles in ancient history, the Battle of the Hydaspes.
Yeah.
Alexander versus Porus.
It's an epic confrontation on the banks of the Helon River. Porus fought with war elephants, which the Greeks had never really faced in large numbers before. It was a brutal, bloody battle.
And Alexander won.
He won, but it was a very hard-won victory. And he was so impressed by Porus's courage, the story goes, that Alexander asked the captured Porus how he wished to be treated, and Porus replied, as a king.
And Alexander did it.
He was so impressed he gave Porus his kingdom back and made him an ally.
But then something happens. Alexander gets to the Bees River, not that much further east, and his army just stops. They mutiny. They refuse to go on.
It's one of the great what-ifs of history.
The story we're usually told is that his soldiers were just exhausted. They were thousands of miles from home. They'd been fighting for years. But the source material suggests there was another very specific reason for their refusal.
Fear.
Fear of what? They'd just beaten Porus and his elephants?
Yes, but they'd heard rumors about what lay beyond the Bees River. They'd heard about the kingdom of the Gangaredia, the people of the Ganges.
They'd heard about Magadha.
They had heard about the Nanda Empire. The Greek historians who are with Alexander's army, they write about this. The soldiers were told that on the other side of the river, the king Nanda was waiting for them with an army of 200,000 infantry, thousands of cavalry, and most terrifying of all,
more elephants.
thousands of war elephants. Some sources say 6,000 of them.
So the Macedonian soldiers had just had this horrific fight against a few dozen of Porus's elephants, and now they're being told there's an army with thousands of them waiting just over the horizon.
Exactly. And they just said, nope, we're done. We're not fighting that. They mutinied. Alexander, for the first and only time in his career, was forced to turn back.
That is just incredible. The reputation of the Nanda army was enough to defeat Alexander the Great without a single arrow being fired.
The shadow of Magadha was long enough to stop the world's greatest conqueror in his tracks.
But Alexander's invasion, even though it was brief, it did leave a legacy, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
First, by defeating all those small, squabbling kingdoms in the Northwest, he inadvertently cleared the board. He made it much easier for the next Indian dynasty, the Mauryas, to come in and unify that region.
He did the dirty work for them.
He did. And he opened up 4 distinct new trade routes between India and the West, both by land and by sea, which had a huge impact on commerce and culture for centuries.
And there's that one little fun fact in the notes about some of the Greek soldiers who stayed behind.
Yes. I love this detail. Not all of Alexander's soldiers went home. Many stayed in India. And the source suggests it wasn't just because they were homesick or got lost. It was salary arbitrage.
Explain that. That's another business term.
It means the pay was better. Apparently, the salary for a professional mercenary soldier in the service of an Indian king was higher than what they could earn back home in the Greek world.
So they were economic migrants.
They were. You had Greek soldiers staying behind to work for Indian princes because the benefits package was better. It's one of the earliest examples of skilled labor migration we have.
I'm staying in India. They have a better dental plan. That's amazing.
It is.
Okay, so let's try to bring this whole epic story together. We've gone from a world of wandering tribes to clay passports to this gigantic, centralized, elephant-powered mining conglomerate that was the Magadha Empire.
It's a journey from, you could say, organized chaos to a highly organized, centralized order. The rise of Magadha really sets the template for what an Indian empire would look like for the next 1,000 years.
How so? What was the template?
It established the very idea of a pan-Indian bureaucratic state. It created the administrative machinery, the tax collection systems, the provincial governments, the use of coinage. The Mauryas, who come next, Chandragupta and the Great Ashoka, they essentially inherited the imperial machine that the Haryankas and especially the Nandas had built. They just fine-tuned it and drove it even further.
And it also solidified the social structures we talked about.
Yes, for better or for worse. The caste system, as a rigid hierarchy, the concept of untouchability, the patriarchal norms, all of that crystallizes and gets codified during this period of empire building. It becomes the social DNA of the subcontinent for millennia.
It really hammers home that history isn't just about kings and battles. It's about systems. It's about who controls the iron mines and the river trade.
It absolutely is. Magadha didn't win just because its kings were brilliant or its soldiers were the bravest. It won because it was the most efficient. It built a system that monopolized resources and scaled up the economy in a way no one else could match.
Which brings us to our final thought. A little provocation to leave everyone with as we wrap this up.
Okay.
We talked a lot about the Nandas, these kings who were dismissed by the old elites as being of low origin.
The son of a barber, yeah.
Right. And we also talked about how they created this state-run mining monopoly to fund their empire. Now, we usually think of the industrial state, a state that uses control of heavy industry to project its power, as a really modern idea, 20th century even.
Sure.
But here we have the Nandas, 2,400 years ago, basically doing just that. They're nationalizing the mining industry to pay for their super army.
It's a striking parallel.
So here's the question. If the Nandas were the first to treat the state as a massive business enterprise monopolizing resources, standardizing measurements to maximize tax revenue, are they actually the ancient ancestors of the modern industrial state?
And to take that one step further, does that mean all the insults about their low birth were really just the aristocratic jealousy of the old guard? Were they just angry that these upstarts with a ruthless new business acumen had made them obsolete?
Were they greedy tyrants? Or were they just the first true CEOs of India Inc.? Something to mull over.
Definitely something to think about.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Thank you.